George Washington. George Washington's favorite food was hoe cakes with honey, small cornmeal pancakes fried in butter and served with sweetness on top. It was a dish of simplicity and comfort. Even as the nation's first president, Washington preferred the same breakfast he'd eaten as a farmer and soldier. Every morning at Mount Vernon, he rose early, drank tea, and ate his hoe cakes before beginning his day. The meal reflected who he was and what early America stood for. Corn was the country's grain, humble, local, and reliable. Butter and honey added richness without extravagance. Together, they symbolized the same values Washington admired in his new nation: hard work, balance, and modest prosperity. He could have chosen luxury. Instead, he stayed loyal to routine. His plate showed that leadership didn't need indulgence, and power didn't need excess. In those hoe cakes lay a quiet message: that the strength of a republic begins with ordinary people doing ordinary things every single morning. John Adams. John Adams preferred simple, hearty New England meals, especially salt cod, cider, and boiled dinners. He was not a man of indulgence or fashion. His food, like his politics, was plain and practical. Salted fish was a staple in Massachusetts homes during his time, a reflection of both the region's seafaring economy and its Puritan roots. It was inexpensive, preserved well, and filled the stomach of a working man. Adams began most mornings with a tankard of hard cider, believing it helped with energy and digestion. Lunch was often bread, cheese, or cold meat, and dinner featured salted cod or stew made from whatever was available. Even as president, his habits never changed. Guests at his table were served the same simple fare, often accompanied by straightforward conversation and little ceremony. To Adams, excess was weakness. He believed moral strength came from discipline, and discipline began with daily life. Even with food, his meals reflected the early American ideal of modesty and self-reliance, the belief that virtue mattered more than luxury. In a world still dazzled by European elegance, John Adams stayed loyal to boiled dinners, salt cod, and cider, meals that tasted like work, duty, and principle. Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson's favorite foods reflected his deep love for both America and France. During his years as ambassador in Paris, he developed a passion for fine dining and brought those influences home to Virginia. He was especially fond of macaroni and cheese, wine, ice cream, and French-style vegetables grown in his own gardens at Monticello. For Jefferson, food was not only nourishment, it was culture, science, and diplomacy served on a plate. He believed good eating was part of good living. Jefferson carefully recorded recipes, experimented with crops, and even imported pasta machines and olive oil from Europe. He popularized dishes that were still unknown to most Americans, blending European refinement with local ingredients. His table at Monticello became a symbol of his ideals: elegance rooted in simplicity, sophistication without excess. While George Washington's meals spoke of labor and restraint, Jefferson's reflected curiosity and intellect. Each dish showed a man fascinated by ideas, flavor, and innovation. He saw the dinner table as a classroom, a place to share knowledge and conversation. In many ways, Jefferson's approach to food mirrored his approach to politics: thoughtful, experimental, and always reaching for a better version of the American experience. Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln's favorite food was apple pie. Simple, traditional, and unmistakably American. He enjoyed it with coffee, often in modest portions, never as indulgence, but as comfort. Lincoln had little interest in luxury or elaborate meals. His diet was plain: corned beef, apples, biscuits, and occasionally bacon. During his presidency, meals at the White House remained humble, reflecting his upbringing on the frontier and his lifelong preference for simplicity. He was known to forget meals entirely during moments of stress or deep thought. Those around him often had to remind him to eat. When he did, he wanted food that felt familiar, the kind of dishes served in log cabins, not at banquets. Apple pie was one of the few things he truly savored. It reminded him of home, of childhood, and of a simpler America he carried with him even in the nation's darkest years. Lincoln's taste in food reflected his character: honest, grounded, and deeply human. In an age when appearances mattered, he didn't care for show. His meals were not about power or presentation. They were about warmth and routine, something constant in a life surrounded by war and loss. In every slice of apple pie, you could taste not just sweetness, but resilience, the quiet endurance of a man who led with both strength and humility. Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt's favorite meal was steak, thick, hearty, and always served with coffee. He ate it the way he lived: fast, energetic, and without pretense. Roosevelt was a man of action, not ceremony. His food had to match his pace. Whether on the battlefield, in the wilderness, or at the White House breakfast table, he preferred meals that were simple but powerful: steak, eggs, rolls, and black coffee, enough to fuel a man constantly in motion. He was known to eat quickly, often finishing before anyone else had started. His appetite was as intense as his personality. Roosevelt believed in strength, of body, of mind, of will, and he treated eating like another act of discipline. He didn't eat to indulge, he ate to stay ready. His love for meat reflected the values of early 20th century America: expansion, energy, and endurance. For Roosevelt, food was never about elegance or showmanship. It was about utility. He embodied the rugged individualism he preached, and his meals reflected it. Steak and coffee weren't just preferences. They were statements, the fuel of a soldier, a hunter, and a president who charged through life as if every day were a campaign. Franklin D. Roosevelt. Franklin D. Roosevelt's favorite foods were simple comfort dishes: grilled cheese sandwiches, scrambled eggs, and hot dogs. Despite coming from privilege, he preferred meals that felt familiar and unpretentious. During the Great Depression and World War II, Roosevelt understood that image mattered. A president who ate the same food as ordinary Americans seemed more relatable, more human. His table reflected empathy. At the White House, lunches often featured soup and sandwiches. Grilled cheese was a constant, easy to prepare, and warm to the spirit. He also famously served hot dogs to the British royal family during their 1939 visit, an act that broke tradition and made headlines. It wasn't just a meal, it was a message. America's strength came from its simplicity, not its ceremony. Roosevelt's approach to food showed his political intuition. In a time of scarcity, he made comfort feel patriotic. While other leaders dined on silver platters, Roosevelt sat with a sandwich and coffee, speaking of hope and unity. His favorite foods weren't symbols of luxury, they were reminders of resilience. To a struggling nation, that meant more than any royal feast. John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy's favorite meal was New England clam chowder, creamy, rich, and distinctly regional. It was the flavor of his childhood, the taste of the Massachusetts coast where he grew up. Despite being surrounded by luxury and state dinners, Kennedy always preferred simple, traditional food. He often requested clam chowder, cold cuts, and fresh fruit over anything extravagant. Even in the White House, he wanted meals that reminded him of home. Kennedy's food choices reflected his style, elegant but grounded. He represented a new kind of American image, modern, youthful, and confident, yet deeply connected to tradition. His fondness for regional dishes like chowder or Boston baked beans carried quiet symbolism. It showed pride in where he came from, an identity rooted not in wealth, but in heritage. Jacqueline Kennedy added European grace to the White House dining room, but John's tastes stayed all-American. For him, food wasn't a stage, it was comfort. It kept him steady amid the pace of politics and the pressures of leadership. Clam chowder wasn't just his favorite meal, it was a link to home, family, and a time before the weight of the presidency. Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon's favorite food was cottage cheese, often topped with ketchup. It was an unusual combination that perfectly reflected his complex personality. Plain at first glance, but not quite ordinary. Nixon believed in moderation and routine. He followed a disciplined diet, avoiding heavy or luxurious meals. Most mornings began with cottage cheese or fruit, and lunches were often light and repetitive. He didn't care for variety. He cared for control. The pairing of cottage cheese and ketchup raised eyebrows even then, but Nixon reportedly enjoyed it for its balance of texture and taste. Some say it was his attempt at a quick, low-fat meal. Others saw it as a symbol of his quirks, a man torn between simplicity and strangeness. He was meticulous in both politics and personal life, and that extended to his plate. Every meal was planned, predictable, and private. His eating habits mirrored his presidency, structured, cautious, and occasionally misunderstood. While Kennedy dined with charm and Roosevelt with warmth, Nixon's table felt restrained. The man who once dined with world leaders often returned to a small bowl of cottage cheese alone. His food, like his legacy, was defined by contradiction, part discipline, part discomfort, and entirely his own. Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan's favorite treat was jelly beans, small, colorful candies that became a quiet symbol of his presidency. He began eating them in the 1960s to help him quit smoking, and the habit never left. By the time he reached the White House, jars of jelly beans were everywhere, on his desk, aboard Air Force One, even in the Oval Office for guests. Reagan believed they represented optimism, variety, and the sweetness of everyday life. Behind the cheerful image, there was practicality too. Reagan preferred simple foods, macaroni and cheese, meatloaf, and homemade soups. He enjoyed comfort over sophistication. The jelly beans, though, defined his public image. They became a symbol of warmth and approachability, a light-hearted reflection of his personality and communication style. Even during tense political moments, a bowl of candy sat nearby, as if to remind everyone that leadership didn't always have to feel heavy. Reagan's food choices echoed the mood of 1980s America, confident, colorful, and forward-looking. The nation saw itself in his optimism, and jelly beans became part of that identity. For him, they were more than candy. They were a philosophy, small pieces of sweetness in a complicated world. Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's favorite food was the classic cheeseburger. Juicy, fast, and familiar, it perfectly matched his personality. Charismatic, energetic, and distinctly American. During his years as governor of Arkansas and later as president, Clinton was known for his love of rich, comforting food. Burgers, fries, barbecue, and pies filled his menus far more often than salads. He had a famously hearty appetite and enjoyed eating on the go, often grabbing food from local diners instead of formal dinners. Clinton's relationship with food reflected the culture of the 1990s, fast-paced, casual, and indulgent. The cheeseburger became a small symbol of that era's optimism and excess. But as his presidency continued, health concerns forced him to change. After heart issues later in life, Clinton dramatically shifted to a plant-based diet, proving that even the most passionate food lovers can reinvent themselves. In many ways, his eating habits told the story of modern America, a nation of abundance, learning to balance pleasure with responsibility. The man who once celebrated fast food became an advocate for healthier living, but the image of Clinton smiling over a burger remained iconic. It represented a time when leadership still felt approachable, and comfort food connected presidents to the people they served. Barack Obama. Barack Obama's favorite food was chili, homemade, hearty, and balanced. It was one of the few recipes he cooked himself, a dish he learned to make long before the White House. His chili was simple: ground turkey or beef, red beans, onions, peppers, and a mix of mild spices. It wasn't fancy, but it was dependable, just like the man who made it. Obama's taste in food reflected his calm and grounded personality. He appreciated good flavors, but disliked extravagance. His meals often focused on moderation and health, favoring lean proteins, fruits, and vegetables. Yet chili remained his signature comfort food, warm, filling, and easy to share. It carried the spirit of community, of families gathering at the table after a long day. He once said that cooking helped him focus, that it was a small, ordinary ritual in an extraordinary life. That attitude showed in everything he did. Obama's chili represented balance between discipline and comfort, between tradition and modernity. In a time of global complexity, his favorite food was reassuringly simple. It reminded people that leadership could still feel human, and that sometimes strength starts with something as ordinary as a bowl of chili. Donald Trump. Donald Trump's favorite foods were fast, familiar, and unmistakably American. He loved McDonald's, KFC, pizza, and Diet Coke. Meals served quickly, consistently, and without pretense. He often said he preferred fast food because it was safe, predictable, and made to the same standard every time. For Trump, that reliability mattered. Whether flying on Air Force One or hosting guests, a Big Mac and fries were never far away. His eating habits reflected both personality and branding. Trump projected wealth and power, yet his food choices were everyman favorites: burgers, steaks, and fried chicken instead of fine dining. It created a kind of paradox, a billionaire who ate like the average American. In rallies and interviews, his love for fast food became part of his image, unfiltered, unapologetic, and rooted in convenience. Every president's plate says something about their time, and Trump's said it loudly. America in the late 2010s was fast-moving, online, and driven by instant gratification. His diet captured that energy, quick, simple, and made for the modern age. To his supporters, it showed authenticity. To his critics, excess. But one thing was certain: Donald Trump's food choices were just like his presidency: bold, familiar, and impossible to ignore. Joe Biden. Joe Biden's favorite food is ice cream, a simple, sweet indulgence that has become almost inseparable from his public image. He's loved it his whole life, often saying he doesn't drink or smoke, but can never resist a scoop of good ice cream. Vanilla is his usual choice, though he's known to enjoy chocolate chip and classic sundaes. For Biden, it's more than dessert. It's comfort, nostalgia, and a symbol of his warmth. Throughout his career, ice cream has followed him everywhere, from campaign trails to White House appearances. Videos of him happily eating cones have become part of his persona, showing a lighter side of leadership. It's a small ritual that humanizes him, reminding people that the president isn't just a policymaker, but a person with simple joys. His love for ice cream reflects the tone of his presidency: familiar, friendly, and grounded. It's not the food of power, but of approachability. While others built images through grand meals or extravagant tastes, Biden's came through a cone of ice cream and a smile. It's a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary pleasures tell us the most about a person.